starting with verse 71 of the Precious Garland by Nagarjuna. Due to having many parts, one does not exist. There is not anything which is without parts. Further, without one, many does not exist. And without existence, there is no non-existence. If through destruction or an antidote an existence ceases to exist, how could there be destruction or an antidote without an existent? Ultimately, the world cannot, through nirvana, disappear. Ask whether it had an end, the conqueror was silent. Because he did not teach this profound doctrine to the worldly beings who were not receptacles, the all-knowing one is therefore known as omniscient by the wise. Thus the doctrine of definite goodness was taught by the perfect Buddhas, the seers of reality as profound, unapprehendable, and baseless. Frightened by this baseless doctrine, delighting in a base, not passing beyond existence and non-existence, unintelligent beings ruin themselves. Afraid of the fearless abode, ruined, they ruin others. O King, act in such a way that the ruined do not ruin you. O King, lest you be ruined, I will explain through the scriptures the mode of the supramundane, the reality that relies not on dualism. This profundity which liberates and is beyond both sin and virtue has not been tasted by those who fear the baseless, the others, the forters, and even by ourselves. A person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them. What person is there other than these? Just as the person is not an ultimate, but a composite of 6 constituents, so too, each of them in turn is a composite and not an ultimate. The aggregates are not the self. They are not in it. It is not in them. Without them, it is not. It is not mixed with the aggregates like fire and fuel. Therefore, how can the self exist? The 3 elements are not earth. They are not in it. It is not in them. Without them, it is not. Since this applies to each, they, like the self, are false. By themselves, earth, water, fire, and wind do not inherently exist. When any 3 are absent, there cannot be one. When one is absent, so too are the 3. If when 3 are absent, the one does not exist, and if when one is absent, the 3 do not exist, then each itself does not exist. How can they produce a composite? Otherwise, if each itself exists, why without fuel is there no fire? Likewise, why is there no water, wind, or earth without motility, hardness, or cohesion? If it is answered that fire is well known not to exist without fuel, but the other 3 elements exist independently, how could your 3 exist in themselves without the others? It is impossible for the 3 not to accord with dependent arising. How can those existing by themselves be mutually dependent? How can those which exist not by themselves be mutually dependent? If as individuals they do not exist, but where there is one, the other 3 are there, then if unmixed, they are not in one place, and if mixed, they cease to be individuals. The elements do not themselves exist individually, so how could their own individual characters do so? What do not themselves individually exist cannot predominate. Their characters are regarded as conventionalities. This mode of refutation is also to be applied to colors, odors, tastes, and objects of touch, I, consciousness and form, ignorance, action and birth, agent, object, acting and number, possession, cause, effect, and time, short and long, and so forth, name and name-bearer as well. Earth, water, fire, and wind, tall and short, subtle and coarse, virtue and so forth are said by the subduer to cease in the consciousness of reality. The spheres of earth, water, fire, and wind do not appear to that undemonstrable consciousness, complete Lord over the limitless. Here, tall and short, subtle and coarse, virtue and non-virtue, and here names and forms all cease to be. What was not known is known to consciousness as the reality of all that appeared before. Thereby these phenomena later cease to be in consciousness. All these phenomena related to beings are seen as fuel for the fire of consciousness. They are consumed through being burned by the light of true discrimination. The reality is later ascertained of what was formerly imputed by ignorance. When a thing is not found, how can there be a non-thing? Because the phenomena of forms are only names, space too is only a name. Without the elements, how could forms exist? Therefore, even name only does not exist. Feelings, discriminations, factors of composition, and consciousnesses are to be considered like the elements and the self. Thereby, the six constituents are selfless.